Both items are a significant part of competitive Pokemon and provide a significant in-battle advantage. The Leftovers provides passive healing, Life Orb provides bonus damage, the Focus Sash provides insurance against a one-hit KO. But have you ever heard of the item Absorb Bulb? Probably not. This strange item is scarcely seen or thought about, and it has a very specific effect. The Absorb Bulb can only activate if your Pokemon is specifically struck by a water-type attack. The bulb, of course, absorbs the water and is then consumed, granting your Pokemon a +1 special attack boost. I think this is a pretty cool item design, interacting with a specific type, and unlike other similar items like Weakness Policy that have a consumable boost effect, it doesn't require the incoming attack to be super effective, it just has to be specifically a water-type attack. However, unfortunately this item has limited use cases. It is a bit too specific to activate, and there are items like the Life Orb or the Choice Specs which grant a more consistent damage boost. But there is a context I'm aware of where this niche item had some value, and it was a long time ago in the competitive doubles format VGC 2012 in Pokemon Black and White version, and it was utilized on the Pokemon Ludicolo. Ludicolo can be a strong Pokemon in certain metagames. It is a Swift Swim Pokemon, which is a great ability granting double speed in the rain. Ludicolo in doubles also has added value thanks to its access to Fake Out, which is a very nice utility move in this context. With its 100% flinch chance, incapacitating an enemy for a turn, potentially shielding your ally from harm. Very useful move to have. Ludicolo is particularly good at using the Absorb Bulb because of its ×4 water resistance, so it's not worried about getting hit by a water-type attack at all. However, there's a slight problem, and that is that because Ludicolo ×4 resists water, why would anyone ever attack Ludicolo with a water-type attack? That would be foolish and not achieve much. But this is competitive doubles we're talking about, and something you can do in competitive doubles is attack your own ally. If Ludicolo's teammate attacks it with a water-type attack, it will activate the Absorb Bulb and achieve a great special attack bonus, and conveniently, there is a move that is perfect for this. In doubles battles, Surf actually hits the entire field. Surf will hit both opponents and your ally. Usually this makes Surf a bad move, but in the case of a Ludicolo with Absorb Bulb, you are not only hitting both opponents with big water-type damage, you are also boosting up your Ludicolo by hitting it with water to activate its Absorb Bulb. How convenient. This is the most reliable way I've seen to take advantage of the Absorb Bulb, because you can guarantee it will activate. But in theory there is other use cases for this item, perhaps even in competitive singles. Water-type attacks are very powerful and common. It is a pretty spammable type, with few things immune to it, especially when you factor in a move like Scald, which has a powerful secondary effect to apply Burn. Water-type attacks are thrown around all the time in competitive singles, and a passive defensive water type could be pretty severely punished by an incoming Absorb Bulb user. Imagine a Dragapult switching in against an Alamamola's Scald or Flip turn, and turning itself into a monstrous threat. I think the Ancient Bulb has some interesting potential. Another way you could use this Ancient Bulb in Gen 9 is by running it on a Pokemon weak to water as a bait. You would invite an incoming water-type attack, but then terrestrialize to a type that resists water. Easily soak that water into the Absorb Bulb to achieve ultimate power. And this would actually be superior to Weakness Policy in this particular scenario, because after terrestrializing, Weakness Policy would no longer activate as your weaknesses have changed, but the Absorb Bulb always activates from a water-type attack specifically. It's certainly an interesting item with a high potential. The fact that it's a 1 per game consumable boost is a bit limiting though, compared to a Choice Specs that may have a more significant detriment to it, but at least doesn't require a specific interaction to activate, and also persists for the whole battle, rather than being consumable. But this Ancient Bulb might just have more to offer than it appears on the surface. I do have to critique a little bit the flavor of the item. It is cool that it activates when struck by a water-type attack, but wouldn't a bulb in fact benefit from water and grow into a flower rather than disintegrating immediately and then providing the holder with a special attack boost. I think this is probably the main reason the item is scarcely used, because of the logical inconsistency of it and the confusion that arises from that. One of my personal favorite recent item additions to the series was in Gen 8, where the item Throat Spray was added to the game, and this is an item quite similar to Absorb Bowl. Throat Spray will be consumed after your Pokemon uses a sound-based move, and once they use a sound move, they will receive a +1 special attack boost. Yet another consumable item that grants a special attack boost, but the Throat Spray has a bit more success in competitive, because of course you can control when it activates. There's an inherent limitation to this, and that is that the Pokemon using it needs to have a sound move to actually activate it, but those that do have powerful sound moves can get a lot out of this Throat Spray. The most well-known abuser of the item is probably Como-O. Como-O has a very convenient use case for the item, and that is the fact that in Gen 8, Como-O's Clangorous Soul was reworked into a unique boosting option. Clangorous Soul is a great boosting move that subtracts 33% of your health and then grants +1 to all your stats. A small price to pay for such an excellent boost. +1 to every single stat. And what's even better is that this is actually a sound move. So when you use Clangorous Soul, you will conveniently consume the Throat Spray, granting an additional special attack boost. So you'll have +2 special attack along with a great amount of defensive boosts and even a speed boost. This is definitely the most convenient way to take advantage of Throat Spray, because it coincides with an actual boosting move. But most sound moves in the game are attacks, and this is where Throat Spray can be awkward for most Pokemon that might want to use it. If a Pokemon uses a strong sound-based attack like Boom Burst with a Throat Spray equipped, they won't actually receive the special attack boost before the attack goes through. They will execute the attack, then receive the special attack boost. So for the first attack that they select, they won't receive that important special attack boost on Throat Spray. Only on the following turns will they receive a Throat Spray boost. It can still be good, of course, but there's a high chance that an incoming Pokemon will force you out and completely erase your Throat Spray boost, as when you switch out, you're never getting that Throat Spray boost back ever again. This item would be so much better if the benefit from it was immediately felt by the first attack that you use. The fact that the special attack boost is delayed a little bit actually significantly impacts the viability of the item. As a result of this, you do not see Throat Spray super often outside of the Como-O example. I've seen the occasional Dunsparce who can use it with Boom Burst on a Stealth Rock lead set, which is kind of interesting, but that's of course very niche. And also, now that I'm looking at it and thinking about it, I do have to question why they chose a Throat Spray for this effect. Not all sound moves are based on using a Pokemon's voice. Yes, they are sound, and sometimes sound is created through screaming very loud, and this might hurt a Pokemon's throat, requiring them to use the Throat Spray, but what about clanging scales? That's like a drum cymbal sound. That's not using your throat to do that, and yet it would consume the Throat Spray despite having nothing to do with the throat. Perhaps this item should have been like a speaker or an instrument, a musical instrument or something like that, that's more universally applicable to the concept of a loud sound. I mean, things making logical sense doesn't really matter. This item could have been called Funny Cheese or something, and I wouldn't care. And it could have this effect on activating based on sound-based moves with no logical through line whatsoever between the Funny Cheese and this effect, and I would not really question it. So what is my point? My point is that I should shut up and simply accept whatever is thrown in front of me without questioning it from now on. That's good, I'll do that now. I'll do that from now on, and that'll be fine. Another insane item that is scarcely talked about is the Blunder Policy. The Blunder Policy is very interesting. This item has the effect of granting you a +2 speed boost if you miss an attack, and after that it is consumed, never to be seen again. This is really weird, isn't it? Because missing an attack is not something you want in Pokemon, and in fact most Pokemon choose to run the most accurate moves that they possibly can to avoid missing, missing is bad. But in this scenario, missing can provide you an advantage, very interestingly, a +2 speed boost of all things. In a competitive context, this is a very difficult item to justify using, because you really have no control over when it will activate. And it also requires you to use a deliberately inaccurate move. And when you select that move, it will either land and not activate your item, or it will miss and then activate your item. So you don't know what's going to happen yourself. That kind of inconsistency is not conducive to competitive success. It's a little ridiculous, in fact. There are high reward moves that are inaccurate, like Dynamic Punch, for example, that at least you can hedge against the miss, I suppose, with the Blunder Policy. You could run Dynamic Punch with its 50% accuracy and either hit it and defeat the opponent with a big move that confuses them, or miss and at least get a speed boost for your troubles. That's the logic behind the item, I suppose, is to hedge against a miss, but is a speed boost really going to save you that much in the event that you miss an attack? And is it worth your item slot? Generally not. Generally this is not worth it. Maybe the stars align and this is very good for you and the speed boost completely carries you to victory. But much of the time this item is just not worth it. But there is a set in the format Gen 9 Battle Stadium Singles where the Blunder Policy was genuinely used. And this is a very interesting case on the Pokemon Skeledirge. In Battle Stadium Singles, you have a team of 6 Pokemon, but you only bring 3 of them to a battle. So the actual battle is just a 3v3. With so many less Pokemon available to you compared to the 6v6 Smogon formats, this is a much faster paced way to play singles. So in this environment, maybe you could justify the Blunder Policy a little bit more. This kind of consumable boost is more valuable in a format where games go for less time, and the speed boost also has a higher impact. And the way Skeledirge would abuse Blunder Policy was alongside the move Sing. Sing is a sleep-inflicting move with 55% accuracy. It will directly put the target to sleep, but it's extremely inaccurate, especially compared to options like Sleep Powder and Spore. But alongside the Blunder Policy, it is actually worth using. If Sing lands, you're extremely happy. The enemy's asleep, and you're off to the races with your Torch Song ramping set here. And if Sing doesn't land, Skeledirge receives that +2 speed boost, which it can actually take great advantage of. Skeledirge does not have another way to boost its speed. A lot of Pokemon get Agility or Rock Polish, not Skeledirge. And with a set like this that ramps with Torch Song, a move that raises special attack upon use, that speed is appreciated. It can turn you into a sweeper. So you're kind of just 50-50ing this. You're either putting the guy to sleep or basically using agility. And even though there's an item attached to that agility use, and it is also tied to literally missing a move that you would like to land, in this scenario, the hedge against the miss is actually good. Another Pokemon that can apparently use this item as well, according to Smogon analysis, is Screamtail, with the same synergy of Sing and Blunder Policy. If it misses, you get the speed boost. And this is another interesting case because Screamtail can be used as a Baton Pass stat distributor. Baton Pass is a move that switches your Pokemon out and carries on all stat changes and advantageous effects to the Pokemon you switch in. It is banned in Smogon's rules, but in Battle Spot Singles it is legal to use, and this actually works quite well with the Blunder Policy. If you land the Sing, it's very good for a Baton Pass support, because you have a completely free turn to boost up with Bulk Up or Calm Mind and pass that on to a teammate. And if it doesn't land, you have Speed that you can now pass to a teammate. So this hedge against the miss has enhanced value when you can carry that speed on to something else and get further value out of it. So in this case, the Blunder Policy actually makes a bit of sense on Screamtail. How intriguing. And I do have to give some immense respect to the flavor of this item, which appears to be just a piece of paper. It's a signed contract, and I guess the one signing it is the Pokemon holding it. So this item means that the law, or contractual law, applies to Pokemon in universe, and you can use this mid-battle. And I assume the contract says that in the event of a miss, Screamtail is allowed to just sit there and become faster, and if the opponent chooses to attack, they will forfeit the game or face legal repercussions. But wouldn't this also require the enemy Pokemon to sign the contract so they are agreeing to the terms? How does this work? Maybe before the battle starts, both trainers sign the Blunder Policy contract and agree to the terms, and then you for some reason have to give this legally binding document to the Pokemon that you want it to apply to for it to actually take effect in a battle. See, this is an example of an item raising incredible world-building questions and actually being a great example of environmental storytelling, and I would commend the item for this reason. Metronome is a very interesting item that has actually existed for a long time, since Gen 4, but has pretty limited competitive use. With a Metronome equipped, if you use the same move multiple times in a row, each consecutive time, it will increase in power 20%, to a maximum of double power after 5 turns. It doesn't go any higher. Theoretically a great item on any Pokemon that spams moves of the same type, over and over. Certainly a cool effect, but there's a reason you don't see this item too often. Most Pokemon don't want to spam the same move over and over, they want to switch moves, and if they do spam the same move over and over, this is very punishable. It's easy to compare the Metronome also with the choice items, which are kind of similar. The choice items force you to use only a specific move while you're in, for a benefit of a stat increase. While Metronome takes multiple turns to ramp up in power, the choice items provide you a boost immediately for spamming the same move. Sometimes you only have to select the move once and then switch out. The choice items end up being more flexible and generally useful than the Metronome. The Metronome also suffers from the fact that if an enemy Pokemon uses the move Protect, the ramping boosts will reset. So if you attack a bunch of times in a row but the enemy protects, that Metronome modifier goes all the way back down to 0. Protect is pretty common in competitive Pokemon, so that's an easy way to just really halt the momentum of this item effect. But there are some use cases for Metronome. The main one being that Metronome is very good at allowing you to 1v1 specific defensive Pokemon. A passive defensive Pokemon like Toxapex can sometimes just sit there spamming Recover over and over, taking less damage from your repeated attacks than they heal with Recover. Metronome solves this problem a little bit, as the more you spam your attacks, the more damage they deal, eventually out-damaging the Recover and forcing Toxapex to exit or perish, enhancing your positional advantage. The Pokemon Kyurem in Gen 7 OU would use a Metronome partially for this interaction against Toxapex. Toxapex actually takes less than half from Earth power, naturally, but with the Metronome ramping the damage every turn, Kyurem eventually out-damages the Recover and defeats Toxapex. This is also useful against the Pokemon Clefable, a very popular defensive fairy type with Magic Guard that is often difficult to power through. But with the Metronome ramping your damage, Clefable cannot afford to sit there healing forever. It is on more of a clock. Basically, any Pokemon that commonly Recover loops you to try and 1v1 you is directly punished by Metronome. These Pokemon don't often run Protect, it's not that valuable for them, they just run a healing move like Recover or Roost, and this can be targeted with Metronome. Another more dastardly way you can take advantage of Metronome is with flinching moves, especially on Pokemon with Serene Grace. Serene Grace is an ability that doubles the secondary effect chances on moves, and the Air Slash plus Serene Grace combination is already powerful and infamous on Pokemon such as Togekiss. Air Slash has a 30% flinch chance, buffed to 60% by Serene Grace, which is just a ludicrously high chance to deny the enemy from being able to act, especially off the back of a pretty powerful 75 power flying type special attack. But when you add a Metronome into the equation, it becomes even worse. This can already completely cheese games, just slowly defeating you by 1,000 cuts with Air Slash over and over as you flinch repeatedly, but Metronome means the damage ramps for each Air Slash, enhancing the odds that you achieve this. Togekiss can do this, and so can Shaman Sky in the Ubers format with the exact same Serene Grace and Air Slash combination. How terrible. At least there's a bit of opportunity cost to this. Shaman Sky does want to have a choice scarf for speed, to hit Air Slash first against more things. Togekiss, from Gen 8 onwards, wants the boots, much of the time, to enhance its utility and defensive value and ignore Stealth Rock. It may also want leftovers for the passive healing. Metronome is not always worth it, but it is definitely considerable for this highly despicable interaction. Another one of my favorite recent new item additions to the series is the Eject Pack. I think this has a very cool effect. If the holder has their stat stages lowered, they are forced to switch out, and after that the item is consumed. Stats can be lowered in Pokemon in many different ways. The enemy can lower your stats with effects like Intimidate and Growl. Moves or abilities that lower stats. There's also the Sticky Web, which lowers your speed on switch in, and all of these would prompt an immediate switch out. And this can actually be awkward, forcing you to pivot when you might not want to. But the best way to use Eject Pack is with deliberate stat stage decreases that you yourself inflict on your own Pokemon with attacks. Many attacks in Pokemon have a high base power and a detriment that is, after you use them, you lose your stats. For example, Psycho Boost has a massive 140 power, far above average for a special attack, but it has the drawback of lowering your special attack stages by 2 after using it, so you can't spam it at that high power. However, you can use that detriment as an advantage here with the Eject Pack, basically turning this into an incredibly powerful pivoting move. After using Psycho Boost, you will, yes, lose your special attack, but afterwards you will trigger your Eject Pack and immediately switch out. This is basically like a hyper-powered U-turn. Yes, you can only use it once per battle, but that initial momentum of such a thing can provide serious merit in the short term. This is also extremely convenient, because you've just had your stats lowered, and switching out resets your stat stages. So the next time you come back in, you will be at your base special attack again. The Eject Pack allows you to temporarily dodge the drawback of the move you just clicked, which is actually really strong. In Generation 9 OU, Deoxys Speed is one of the most common abusers of the Eject Pack. It has Psycho Boost, which I've just mentioned, as a great way to activate the effect. You also have Superpower as a mixed attacking option that also activates Eject Pack. This move will lower your attack and defense by 1 upon being used. That's a stat stage decrease, which activates the Eject Pack. A pretty incredible option for short-term momentum. Even powerful legendaries can use the Eject Pack, like Eternatus with this set from Gen 8 Ubers. The powerful Dragon-type special attack Draco Meteor lowers special attack by 2 upon use, which will also activate the Eject Pack, giving Eternatus some uncharacteristic forward momentum. This Pokemon does not have access to any pivoting options, so this is a temporary pivoting option in a pinch. And that's the real value of Eject Pack, is it can turn these moves into pivoting options on Pokemon that don't usually get such a thing, which can make a significant difference. And my favorite example of Eject Pack being used in a competitive context was on Ozma's famous Leavanny Sun team, which hit #1 in the world in Gen 9 OU. And a small part of that was thanks to the Eject Pack on Leavanny, giving it one extra option to nudge it towards viability. Leavanny is of course a terrible Pokemon, but it found a niche on this team thanks to its unique combination of traits. Chlorophyll on the Sun team was useful for double speed. Sticky Web is a powerful entry hazard that lowers the speed of enemies that are grounded by 1 if they switch in. And Leavanny is the only Pokemon with this combination of being a Sun Sweeper that also has Sticky Web. With Low Kick you can threaten Kingambit, Triple Axle can threaten Dragonite and Gliscor, and then the final piece of the puzzle was this Leaf Storm as a mixed option on the special side that also allowed you to pivot with Eject Pack. Leavanny, having this key momentum option, was able to keep the team's pace high, make Leavanny more flexible, and allow it to even support the team by achieving entry points for others. With an Eject Pack, Leavanny achieved heights never before conceivable. Very inspirational. Now, I'm sure you're aware of the concept of running a bad item on purpose to use the move Trick and give the opponent the item you're holding. Something like Iron Ball, which is an active detriment being given to an opponent to put them at a disadvantage. This is a common phenomenon. But of all of these items that you can trick onto an opponent to screw them over, I have one that is my favorite that I think is the most interesting. And that is the Ring Target. This is a pretty cool item. The Ring Target means that the Pokemon holding this item will have its type immunities nullified. Any immunity granted solely by the Pokemon's types is disabled while this item is equipped. and this has very interesting applications. You can trick this item onto an opponent to erase their type immunities completely, which is always going to be useful. That's a terrible thing to have your immunities stripped away. But you can actually specifically build around this for a win condition. I think the type that gets the most out of this by far is the electric type. The main detriment of electric type is that they cannot hit ground types. Ground types are completely immune to electric type attacks. But if you trick a ring target onto the enemy's ground type, all of a sudden, they are wide open to the electric type attacks they were previously immune to. There are also a lot of electric types that lack coverage, and this is part of their balance. The most extreme example of this is Regieleki. Regieleki is an electric type, and a generally very extreme Pokemon. It is the fastest Pokemon in the whole series, with a base 200 speed. And it has the ability Transistor, which enhances the power of its electric type attacks. It also pretty much only has electric type attacks. It's got a couple exceptions like Ancient Power and Swift, but they're scarcely very good. It does incredible damage with electric moves, but only doing good damage with electric moves is very limited because of the prevalence of ground types. So some teams would aim to actually trick a ring target onto a key ground type such that Regieleki could just go crazy and spam electric moves to its heart's content. This was especially prominent in Gen 8 when the move Hidden Power was removed from the game. A lot of electric types relied on Hidden Power as their answer to this problem, because Hidden Power could be any type, and by just using Hidden Power Ice or Hidden Power Grass, you could hit the ground types that you otherwise couldn't. But without Hidden Power existing anymore, the incentive to run Trick Ring Target rose. It is a pretty gimmicky strategy. It relies on the opponent playing into it, but it can work surprisingly well in the right scenario. Landorus Therian tends to be a guy who wants to switch in defensively and make Stealth Rock and U-turn to pivot safely to allies. It's pretty common to just invite in Landorus Therian, and once you do that and you trick the ring target onto them, then the plan can begin motion. And I can't help but notice that in Gen 9, with Regieleki recently unbanned, this game plan might be possible again in Generation 9, as it was in Gen 8. Regieleki is now legal once again, with Terra Blast being banned. And there are so many more ground types to target, like Great Tusk. Gliscor is extremely prominent. Landorus Therian is still around. And the beauty of this strategy is that teams often tend to run just one ground type. There are exceptions occasionally, but it's pretty common to just have one bulky ground type. It's usually not a good idea to stack a lot of defensive types in competitive Pokemon. That opens up defensive weaknesses, as you are carrying a bunch of Pokemon weak to the same thing. A lot of teams will just have the dedicated bulky ground type. So if you can get the ring target on that bulky ground type, you're off to the races. Another Pokemon that can actually take pretty good advantage of the ring target is Rotom and its various forms. Rotom just has access to Trick itself, and can then directly take advantage of the ground type that switches in, now being vulnerable to electric moves. And you may think that there's a problem with this strategy, which is that Rotom Heat, or Rotom Wash, or whoever, have ground immunity, and that's one of their strongest traits, and by carrying a ring target, wouldn't you erase that ground immunity? Well, no you wouldn't, because ring target specifically disables immunities granted from typing. And this immunity from Levitate is granted by an ability, not a typing. So Rotom Heat would still be completely immune to ground, not worried about any detriment from the ring target, and it could get all of the upside from tricking a ring target onto an opponent. This can work as well. Certainly a little bit of a gimmick, and it's inconsistent. You can't always guarantee it will happen, but when it does happen, it is beautiful, and it's a really fun thing to do. I kind of love that this is in the game. Some item like this that interacts with the type chart and switches things around in interesting ways, with a high potential for reward for when you actually pull it off. Very cool stuff. Always loved the ring target. Of all the detrimental items you can trick onto an opponent, I think this is by far the coolest one. And another very cool item that is actively detrimental to hold, but has interesting applications, is the Sticky Barb. The Sticky Barb is an item that, if you hold it, you will lose 1/8 of your max HP per turn. It provides no advantage, and only hurts you. But what's interesting about this compared to other detrimental items is that you don't need a trick or switcheroo to give it to an opponent, because if an attacker makes contact with you, they will just receive the item. So it has this built-in way to be transferred to an enemy. There's a problem with this though, and that is the fact that the enemy has to not be holding an item for this to work. You cannot receive an item if you already have one. You have to have consumed it or have had it removed or just not be holding one to begin with, which is very uncommon. But one Pokemon that can take incredible advantage of the sticky Barb is Clefable, for many different reasons. This is actually one of its best sets in Gen 9 OU to just run a sticky Barb, which is quite interesting. First of all, Clefable's ability Magic Guard means it itself is totally immune to the detriment. Magic Guard grants a complete immunity to indirect damage. So damage from poison or hazards or spikes, or Sticky Barb is completely ineffective against Clefable. So that's great. That certainly helps. You won't be ruined by the Sticky Barb damage over time. Another reason that Clefable can take advantage of the Sticky Barb very well is because it has knockoff to just remove the enemy's item. So after you have removed their item and they then attack you, their item slot will be free to unfortunately receive this Sticky Barb transferred from you to them, and then they will start taking a massive 1/8 of their max HP per turn. What's nice about this Sticky Barb damage over time effect as well is that it can apply to more things than just a regular status ailment. Certain Pokemon are immune to status or difficult to status, but Sticky Barb will apply this damage over time effect no matter who they are or what they stand for. To be able to do damage over time to something like Garganical is very cool. The only thing that will stop this is Magic Guard, which is scarcely seen and pretty rare. Only Clefable gets it in OU, and very few other things do in Gen 9. Another reason this is quite good in Gen 9 is because of the rise of the item Booster Energy. Booster Energy is a very commonly seen item that is only usable on the Paradox Pokemon, and what Booster Energy does is that it's immediately consumed upon switch-in to activate the ability Photosynthesis or Quark Drive, which will grant a bonus to the Pokemon's highest stat. So it's an immediately consumed boost to that Pokemon's highest stat. Very powerful item with incredible short-term value used on such threats as Iron Valiant and Iron Moth and Raging Bolt and people like this to just immediately get a big stat boost as soon as you switch in. Yes, it's temporary, but the value is clear on that one. So because there's all these powerful threats running around with consumable items that free up their item slot, they are vulnerable to getting that Sticky Barb transferred to them. Especially Iron Valiant, who uses close combat quite frequently. If you switch in on a close combat, you resist it, and then you give them the Sticky Barb, and put them on a clock as they take a significant 1/8 of their max HP every turn. You have to make contact to receive the Sticky Barb, unfortunately, so special attackers aren't worried about it, but there are many physical attacking Paradox Pokemon that use this Booster Energy, and with this influx of a bunch of Pokemon using consumable items, that's where the Sticky Barb has enhanced value. These offshoot competitive items are always fascinating to me, and I'm glad that they've actually continued to add these items to the game with very specific effects that often find interesting ways to be used here and there. I think this is actually one of the cooler things about Gen 8, despite all its faults, is that they added items like the Throat Spray and the Eject Pack. Even though these weird item designs are not always the most amazing thing in the world competitively, rising to the top and being seen on every team, just having one extra option in your team building toolkit is always nice, and creative players can sometimes unearth a really interesting use for an overlooked item in the right context. I think it's fun. Thank you for watching to the end, folks, and because you have watched to the end, you are now presented with a choice between two options. Please type in the comments down below 1 or 2 to select from these two options. It's a very important choice. I hope you make the correct one. Thank you.